Thanks, Shamil. Good morning, everyone. Give me a 30 second before I present you the presentation. Can you? I think, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Shamil, and good morning, everyone. While the institution is here, the knowledge bank is here, I'll try to set the context with whatever experience I've had. It's really been exciting times to be talking to you before you, speaking about the electronic sector and semiconductor opportunities in India and US. Uh, how and India and US can collaborate together to drive this the electronic sector opportunity, especially when amidst the macroeconomic, the challenging environment, the macroeconomic situation, India and US offering a shining contrast. So India is emerging as a go-to destination for investments globally, especially when the countries like China, Germany, some of the European countries are facing difficulties, sluggish economy, rising inflation, rising cost of production, pushing people to look at locations which are more competitive. In such situations, also India has been clocking about 7% GDP growth and is expected to clock a similar growth in the next few years. And it will not be too much of a surprise that India is expected to become one of the largest economy by 2050. It's expected to be a developed economy contributing to about 15% of the global GDP, global economy, global GDP. It has created that kind of an economic base in the last few years, where if we speak about India's aspiration to become the global, one of the top economies by 2050, it's quite possible and achievable. For more than 20 years, over 2 decades, China market has been irresistible gravity for the MNCs, for the investments. But post the pandemic and post the black swan events, now the business leaders are wanting to look at other location, other geographic location, given the high cost of compliances, the regulatory challenges, rising geopolitical tension, and the rising competition. The key question that the companies are asking today, if not China, then where? Another question they're asking is, can my company survive if they leave the world's biggest market? So what happened, we did a survey of the companies to seek answers on these two questions. And you can see the results on the right, the graph. It says, if not China, the companies are looking at developing Asian countries like India or the US. By 2020 would have been in favor of developing Asia. If you look at 2021, it's in the favor of US. This presents a great opportunity for India and US to collaborate more and see how the both can leverage synergies and drive the economic work for electronics and semiconductor business in these geographies. While this is not new for these two geographies, India and US have recently US has actually picked China and become the number one trading partner for India. We heard in the sessions before this where the total trade between the two countries is to the tune of $178 billion, which is used to be about 20 billion in 2008. So like a staggering CAGR growth of 14%. So if you look at the current numbers, the FDI investments in India last year have been $27 billion. The domestic investment has been 70 billion. But if you look at the US FDI in India in the last 3 years, it's been cumulative 65% of the total investments, which is quite. Speak at length about the India's and India and US's increasing economic ties, which has resulted into a lot of iconic investments in India, and especially in the sector like electronics, IT, automotive, food processing, and healthcare. In terms of numbers, the top sectors which have been receiving FDI in India has been electronics, services, chemicals, construction, and healthcare. This is essentially because of the market that India is, on the basis of the several macroeconomic parameters which are working in favor of India, with financial attractiveness, need for technology, burgeoning middle class, availability of skills and people. Can you imagine India's per capita GDP has grown twice, 2x in the last 6-7 years. India is one of the largest market for smartphones. It's top three. It's amongst the top three economies for digital consumption. It's one of the house. More than 50% of the GSCs in the world are located in India, and over 1.4 million workforce only in digitally skilled and employees, which is creating a large employee base. One of the largest, fastest growing OTT market in India, and this is also reflected in the electronic sector. If you see, go by the MeitY data. MeitY is expecting about $300 million market output by 2026. Even conservatively look at the supply side, the kind of investments that have been made, reaching 200 to 50 million is not very difficult by 2026, which is again a staggering growth of 11.5%, one of the fastest growth in the electronic sector. This is essentially driven by the 4 or 5 key sectors, including mobile phones, consumer electronics, auto electronics, electronic components, strategic electronics, defense electronics. If I take an example of a smartphone or an iPhone particularly, while the ratio of a smartphone, George will know better than these numbers, but 2013-14, I think the penetration of the smartphones was just 15%. 16% of the total mobiles sold in the country. Today, if I look at the sales of iPhone last year, iPhone 14 constitutes about 60% of the total iPhone sales in India, which is one of the most expensive, most latest. If you look at the premium segment of phones, which is more than 30,000 rupees phones, it contributes to about 11% of the total 153 billion phones sold in the last year. This is increasing at 40% year on year. And this Indian smartphone average prices come up to about $224 into 2022, which is about 18% up from the year previous to that. All the entry level phones and the budget level phones has seen the decline, especially because the premium segment is continuing to grow owing to the quality driven demands, faster upgrades, and there's the support of schemes such as no cost EMI, buy now, pay later, etc. So it's quite an exciting time to be. And similar trend can be seen in the semiconductor sector. Semiconductor sector, the demand for semiconductor was about $24 billion, $24 to $34 billion a few years back, and expected to grow to $64 billion by 2026. And this is MeitY data. We try to map it validate with the bottom up. Even if not 64, it's easily about $55 to $56 billion easily. And if you compare this with the world data, there has been a cyclicity of demand. We've all heard about the semiconductor chips not available in the market, for which there has been delay of launch of iPhones, delay in the delivery of the vehicles. With the cyclicity of the demand, then the semiconductor actually dipped, the demand dipped in 2023. Then it's actually picking up globally. But if you see at India level, the demand never dipped. It's actually increasing at a staggering rate of 17% as a CAGR growth, and is expected to grow until 2026. Essentially, there are 4 sectors which are driving the semiconductor demand. One is the telecom, essentially because of the 5G rollout. Second is mobiles and wearables, which is one of the largest, 50% of the total demand. Automotive, industrial, and consumer electronics. While we've spoken about the demand, let me give you a brief about how the supply looks like. The demand, I'll map the demand with the supply. The demand is going to increase to $224 to $50 billion by 2026. Look at the import dependency. Look at the graph on the left. The import dependency has reduced from 46% somewhere around 2014-15 to about 31-32% recently, expected to go down to 15%. Because of the indigenous capacity that we're trying to build, the anticipated, it might take 2-3 years more in the most conservative scenario, but we will reach this sooner or later. On the right, if you see that it's kind of the indigenous capacity that we're trying to develop in India is expected to grow by 2.5x by 2026. And more interesting to know that we are trying to develop export capabilities in India, which is expected to increase from 15-16% to 38% of the total supply. So India is emerging as a high quality, low cost, effective market, which is an answer to China plus one strategy. And this is the kind of the supply that we have created, the kind of competitiveness that the country is trying to create. This is essentially based on three pillars. What India has done over the past few years is adopted an integrated and comprehensive framework with connecting aspects of incentives, infrastructure, skill development, and overarching institutional framework to ensure this happens. The plans are implemented and grounded. If I speak about the fiscal incentives, there are several policies such as PLI, we all aware of, specs policies, the production link incentives, semiconductor program, one of the biggest programs that India has ever launched, state level incentive. Speaking of semiconductor program, it's a $10 billion program to drive the semiconductor, ensuring that we start manufacturing semiconductors. I get asked this question in several forums, saying how real is the semiconductor dream of India? I would want to answer it differently. Would say how far have we reached in this attempt to make this dream happen? We have made several attempts in the past, in the 4-5 attempts that we made, where we've addressed some bits and pieces of the semiconductor ecosystem requirement or the critical success factors that are required. This is the first, I would say, this is the first time that India has made an integrated attempt for the policy, infrastructure, skilling, and everything, the institutional structure, bringing all together to make the semiconductor dream happen. I'm looking forward to those days when the first chip is being manufactured in India, and I don't think that's a dream too far. Second is the infrastructure piece. Infrastructure, Government of India has come out with several schemes, Gati Shakti to enhance the logistic competitiveness of the SEZs, economic corridors, national infrastructure pipeline, electronic manufacturing clusters. We also are learning from our mistakes. After EMC 1.0, we will launch EMT 2.0, where Government of India is trying to bring all the ecosystem together, to ensure there is electronic sector competitiveness in one place. Then there are the dedicated freight corridors and industrial corridors connecting these EMCs and these SSA to the market, to other clusters. And finally, the skill development initiatives. To quickly go through, and this is also being further incentivized, further sweetened by the states. States are not too behind, but they're further sweetening this deal for the investors. But there are additional incentives made possible through capex incentive, additional production link incentive, trying to bring ease of doing business. There are about 23 EMCs as I spoke about, which is being launched in India, which will cater only to the electronic manufacturing industries. As I mentioned, to enhance the logistic competitiveness and further enhancing the competitiveness of the companies, there is Gati Shakti, which is one of its kind master plan of a $1.2 trillion investment to improve multi-modal connectivity. There's a national infrastructure pipeline to one of its kind comprehensive plan to raise quality of life and ease of living in India. Then there are industrial corridors solving the existing problems of the companies and connecting these SEZs to the market. And as I spoke about, overarching institutional structure. Government of India is trying to build an institutional structure to ensure all these plans are implemented on ground. And this is the first time that we're seeing at this level, at the Government of India level, the top level, there's a strong institutional structure in place. But the changes are not very easy, we all know. The changes take some time for it to fructify. There are some challenges for Indian companies to navigate through the Indian market, and there is a need for knowledge of location, what incentives, regulatory compliances, for fast tracking of grounding of these investments. So while the change is happening, it is essential for all the companies to know, and this is the challenge that the Government of India need to resolve at both state and central level. This is where PwC is trying to help companies right from to navigate the Indian market, understand which location, understand what the feasibility is, what is the competitiveness of a location, how does the tax and regulatory piece work in each of this location. We support in the project management office, helping them grounding of investment during construction, planning phase, implementation phase, post-implementation phase. We've been working with about 75-80 companies already, helping them identify locations and from the regulatory piece to the implementation phase, as I mentioned. So we'll be more than happy if any of you have specific requirements, please reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to help you. With this, I really open up the session. I'm more than happy to listen to the dignitaries on the panel, which is the institution in itself. While setting the context, I'm more than happy to actually, if there any question that you have, and maybe offline I can take those questions. Thank you. Bipin, over to you.